My name is Maria Whitman, 34 years old. When my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I told myself my boyfriend Jack would hold the line with me, be the steady voice when the monitors screamed and the nights got long. Instead, he stood in the kitchen doorway with his arms folded and said, "It's me or him. I'm not spending the next 6 months watching you play nurse to a man who never liked me." Dad didn't have 6 months, he had 6 weeks. I had already taken family leave, learned the language of morphine pumps, memorized the vascular map of the forearm the way a child memorizes constellations. I came home smelling like antiseptic and stale coffee. Date nights turned into dosage charts. Conversations turned into logistics. He was dying. How could Jack not see that? "You never showed up for my mom when she had surgery," Jack said, voice clipped. "But now you're Saint Maria, devoted daughter of the year?" The words landed because there was truth inside them. When his mother had needed help 3 years ago, I had thrown myself into work. I'd told myself I was being practical. I wasn't. I was afraid of hospital smells and conversations about endings. I let him carry the weight alone. "This is different," I said, already tired of defending triage decisions with someone who didn't want to understand. "How?" he asked, eyes hard. "Because it's your parent this time?" We said things we couldn't unsay. I accused him of being heartless. He accused me of hiding inside my father's illness to avoid our own problems. 2 days later, he packed a bag and moved in with a friend. "Call me when you remember you have a boyfriend," he said, like love was an appointment I'd missed. In the 5 weeks that followed, I divided myself between a hospital room and a house that still held his cologne in the closet. Friends said he'd come around when it was over. Grief scrambles people, they said. Maybe. He didn't scramble back. Not when Dad stopped eating. Not when Dad forgot my name. Not when hospice whispered days, not weeks. Jack sent one text the day before the end. "I'm sorry for your loss." I buried my father surrounded by men from his old job and cousins I barely recognized. There was a Jack-shaped space beside me where comfort should have stood and didn't. Afterward, I carried home a stack of casseroles and the kind of silence that hums. 3 weeks later, I was sifting through insurance forms when the phone rang. "Ms. Whitman," the lawyer said, smooth as dark wood, "this is Mr. Buchanan. We need to discuss your father's estate. Tomorrow at 2?" I expected a ledger of small things. The paid-off sedan, the thrift store wardrobe, maybe enough to cover the final bills. Instead, Buchanan's office felt like the set of a scene where the camera slowly reveals the twist we should have seen coming. He opened a thick folder and began to read. Your father, it turned out, had been building quietly. Real estate in the 80s. Patient stock picks that had multiplied, a modest inheritance grown with care. The total, approximately $3.2 million, knocked the breath from my lungs. My father, who patched sweaters and clipped coupons, had left behind an empire of prudence. But the number wasn't the twist. Buchanan slid a page toward me with a handwritten note paper-clipped to the will. My father's careful script carried the needle that threaded everything together. "Maria, I watched as Jack stepped away when you needed him most. Crisis reveals character. This inheritance is yours, with a single condition. If you reconcile with Jack in the next 5 years, marry him, cohabitate with him, or transfer any portion of this estate to him, then everything goes to the American Cancer Society. Choose wisely. Love, Dad." I read it 3 times and the room tilted. Buchanan cleared his throat. "Your father drafted very specific triggers," he said. "Any reconciliation or transfer within 5 years automatically diverts the entire estate to the charity. The language is ironclad." "Did he say why?" I asked, though the answer pulsed in the margins of the note. "He came in 3 weeks before he passed," Buchanan said gently. "He mentioned overhearing a call. Jack said, his words, 'Let the old man die so we can get our lives back.'" The sentence snagged me like a hook because I remembered the night. The fight, the slammed call, the way Dad half woke to the fluorescent buzz and the truth of us. Buchanan added, "Your father also believed Jack had been checking property records. He asked me to protect you from avoidable mistakes." I left the office with a folder under my arm and my father's voice in my pocket. At home, I opened my laptop and saw my browser stuffed with numbers I'd pretended not to want, rental properties I'd never known he owned, early positions in companies that turned into giants, a blueprint of discipline disguised as modesty. I sat on the couch with the note and let gratitude and grief braid themselves around the same breath. At exactly 7, the front door unlocked. Jack still had his key. He walked in wearing a shirt I'd never seen and holding my favorite Pinot like a prop that would cue the scene he wanted. "Hey, Rhea," he said softly, the nickname he'd abandoned somewhere between the ER and the infusion ward. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." He set the bottle down and sat too close for how far we'd been. "I'm sorry," he began. "I was scared. I handled everything badly. I should have supported you." His voice had the cadence of a rehearsed apology, the kind that hits the beats without finding the note. "What changed?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "Yesterday you skipped the funeral. 6 weeks ago you told me to choose. Tonight you're contrite. What changed?" He shifted. "My sister talked sense into me." "Which sister?" I asked. "The one posting from Miami an hour ago?" I turned my phone so he could see the sunburnt proof. He blinked, recalibrated. "We talked on the phone," he said. The lie clanged in the room. "Let's try honesty," I said. "When did you find out my father left me money?" His eyes flicked toward the closed laptop. "I didn't," he said. I stood, opened the laptop, and turned the screen. Property value sites. My father's address. Searches from 2 days ago. The day before his text. "We need to talk." "I was curious," he said finally. "After he died, I wondered if there'd be enough to help us get back on our feet." "We weren't off our feet," I said, "and it's not us." "Extra money never hurts," he tried, casual. "How much is it?" I let the question hang. He pushed. "Enough to pay off your place? More than that?" And there it was, the shape of his return, the angle of his apology. I felt the old ache stir and refused to stand this time. "If you're here for me," I said, "sign this." I pulled a single page from the folder I'd prepared, after Buchanan's warning. A simple cohabitation/asset waiver agreement, acknowledging that any inheritance remains my separate property and cannot be claimed or commingled. Color drained from his face. "This is hostile," he said. "It's like you don't trust me." "Do I have a reason to?" I asked. He stared at the lines, at the signature block that wouldn't open a vault. For the first time that evening, the polish cracked and something raw showed through. Anger, calculation, the quick math of a plan unraveling. "How much is it?" he asked again, sharper. "Enough," I said. "Enough to change the way I sleep." "We're supposed to be a team," he said, standing. "What's yours is mine, right?" "Not inheritance," I said. "Not in this state, and not under my father's condition." "What condition?" I lifted the note. Read the part that mattered. His jaw flexed as I reached the clause about reconciliation, about charity, about 5 years stretched like a bridge he wasn't allowed to cross. "He can't do that," Jack said. "He did," I said, "and I'm grateful." He stared at me, running through the arsenal. Hurt, pleading, indignation, charm. He set the wine down like a gavel and reached for gentleness again. "I love you, Rhea," he said. "Let's start over." I walked to the door and opened it. "I'm starting over," I said. "You're not in it." For a second, I saw the man I had wanted him to be. Then I saw the man he was. He stepped into the hall, turned back for one last angle, and found none. When the door closed, the house held its breath. I leaned against it, the folder under my arm, my father's handwriting against my heart, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not relief, not yet. Clarity. I didn't sleep. The house kept replaying footsteps that weren't there, rehearsing arguments I wouldn't have again. Around 3 a.m., I made tea. I didn't drink and read my father's note until the ink felt memorized by my bones. By dawn, I had a list. Change the locks, call Buchanan, forward my mail from Jack's place where a few packages sometimes went, unlink the last shared subscription we'd kept out of habit. Small doors closing. At 8, my phone lit up with an unknown number that wasn't unknown. "Rhea, please don't hang up." I didn't. It was too early to waste words. "You left your key on purpose?" I asked. A beat. "I realized it was disrespectful to keep it." "You realized you couldn't use it." Silence. Then the softer voice. "I came over last night because I love you." "You came over because you thought there was money." "I thought there might be a way for us to fix this." He inhaled like he was about to dive. "I'll sign your paper." "My paper," I repeated, watching dust float through a bar of morning light. "The waiver, the cohabitation thing, I'll sign today." "Why?" "Because I want you back." "Or because you think you can argue it later," I said, and the light shifted on the wall, the way truth shifts a face. "Because you think you can move in. We blend a few things, and some judge calls it commingled regardless of a signature." "I'm not gaming this," he said, and for a moment the old tenderness came through like radio static. "I miss you." "You missed the funeral." He swallowed that one. Let me come by at lunch. I'll sign. No drama. I hung up without agreeing and called Buchanan instead. He answered on the second ring, the kind of man who wakes before alarms and trusts good pens more than good people. Ms. Whitman, he said, warm but to the point. Jack wants to sign a waiver. Excellent, he said. Bring him here. I'll notarize. And I'll draft a second acknowledgement stating he's received independent advice. What if he refuses counsel? Then the acknowledgement will state that he declined after being advised to seek it. Either way, we document intent and understanding. He paused. And Maria, don't meet him alone. Meet him here. The old me might have argued that it was overkill. The current me wrote down the address even though I already had it. By noon, I was in the leather and mahogany room again, heart steady this time. Jack arrived in a navy blazer I'd never seen, the bottle of wine version of clothing. He flashed a smile at the receptionist and nothing at me. Buchanan came out personally. Mr. Hale, he said, extending a hand he didn't love extending. Thank you for coming. Let's make this efficient. We sat. Buchanan slid the document across the desk and explained each paragraph like he was teaching a class I had finally enrolled in. Separate property defined, no commingling, no constructive trust claims, no implied partnership, no tenancy, no quid pro quo. He paused for questions after each section. Jack had none. Final page, Buchanan said. Your signature acknowledges you understand this and that you are not under duress. Jack took the pen, then looked up. What if we get married? He asked. Calm, casual. Buchanan didn't blink. This agreement still stands unless explicitly superseded by a later instrument, which Ms. Whitman would be ill-advised to sign. He signed. His handwriting was neat and careful, the way people write when they think care is persuasive. Buchanan notarized and handed me a copy. We'll file a memorandum, he said, not publicizing the inheritance, just putting notice in the right places. Jack waited until we were in the hall. There, he said, spreading his hands. I proved it. You proved you can hold a pen, I said. Now prove you can hold a boundary. He didn't like that line, but he kept his voice calm. Dinner tonight, neutral ground. What changed since last night? I asked. He blinked. I just signed away a claim to your future. Doesn't that earn a conversation? It earns a receipt, I said. And you have it. In the parking lot, he followed me to the car. You're punishing me, he said, for leaving, for being honest about how hard it was. I'm protecting myself, I said, from thinking a changed tone is a changed heart. That's rich, he snapped, considering how you were when my mom was sick. It was the right knife. It bit. I've already told you. I was wrong then, I said. The difference is, I'm not pretending it didn't happen. He leaned on my door, voice dropping to the version he used to sell clients a plan they didn't need. We could have a future most people dream about, he said. Travel, a house that doesn't creak, security, kids maybe. You didn't want kids, I said. I didn't want them when we were scraping. We weren't scraping, I said, and the way he didn't correct himself told me more than the words had meant to. Move your hand, Jack. He did, but not before he said, You'll regret this. I drove away with the windows down and the radio off. That afternoon, the locksmith replaced the deadbolt with a heavy one that shut like a safe. I boxed his leftovers, 2 hoodies, a phone charger, a toothbrush that had watched me cry, and set them on the porch with his name on blue tape. When he texted, You don't have to do this, I sent a picture of the box and a time window for pickup. When he wrote, You're cruel, I put my phone in a drawer and went for a walk. Grief is a long road with a lot of strangers. A woman in her 60s passed me with a bouquet of grocery store lilies. A little boy biked past with a flag tied to the back, the kind that frays in wind and looks better for it. I thought about my father's investments, the accumulation of small, unglamorous choices made over decades. I thought about how love should look like that, quiet, compounding, not speculative. I went home lighter than I left. By evening, the box was gone. At 9, my friend Tasha called. I ran into Jack, she said, the warning already in her tone. He told me you froze him out. He said you're different since... She didn't finish the sentence. I am different, I said. I'm also the same, just finally honest. He said you made him sign something. I did. He said it was because your dad left you money. I closed my eyes. Tasha, I don't want to make you pick sides, but I can't carry his version too. I know, she said quickly. I told him I wasn't an audience. I'm just checking on you. I'm okay, I said, and realized it was true enough to say out loud. After we hung up, I stood in the doorway of the guest room and looked at the bed no one had slept in for months. My father's sweater lay folded on the chair, the one with the elbow patches he insisted weren't a style choice. I put the sweater over my shoulders and sat on the floor and let the day go. The next morning brought an email from Buchanan with scanned copies and a line that steadied me. Clarity is an asset. Protect it. I replied with a thank you and a question that had been stirring all night. Can he challenge later? People can always challenge, he wrote. Winning is another matter. Document everything. Keep your accounts separate. No keys, no stays, no just until. Grief tempts leniency that looks like kindness and functions like risk. I took a picture of my empty key hook and attached it like a small vow. Jack tried one more approach before the weekend. He waited outside the grocery store, hands in his pockets like a man posing as regret. I'm not coming over, he said, preempting the refusal. He searched for a word. Miss us. There's no us, I said gently, because gentleness is a kind of armor too. He nodded like he'd rehearsed accepting that. What would it take? He asked. For what? For you to believe me. The one thing you can't fake, I said. Time. He flinched. 5 years? You heard the terms, I said. 5 years is just the number on the will. The real number is however long it takes me to trust who I am when I'm not bending around you. He looked at me like I'd spoken a language he'd never learned. You're not the same, Rhea. I hope not, I said. He huffed a laugh with no humor in it. You're cold. No, I said, I'm clear. I pushed my cart past him and didn't look back until the door whooshed shut on a world that had stopped pretending it could stay as it was. That night, I packed away the last of the casseroles I wasn't going to eat and made a simple bowl of rice and eggs the way Dad used to, with soy sauce and a slice of scallion and a quiet that felt earned. I carried the bowl to the table and set it on top of the folder, on top of the notarized lines and the careful script that had already saved me twice. I ate every bite. I slept. Spring came late that year, like it had to ask permission first. By the time the trees along Willow Avenue finally budded, I'd stopped expecting mornings to hurt. I'd gone back to work part-time, the kind of work that didn't mind tears in the break room or silences between meetings. I volunteered at the hospice where Dad had spent his final weeks. Small shifts, mostly paperwork and coffee runs. It was the only place that felt honest about loss. That's where I met Ethan Rowe. He was the nurse who'd handled Dad's case on alternate weekends, calm in a way that didn't ask for anything back. The first time we spoke outside the ward, it was over a broken printer. I was trying to unjam a cartridge, muttering under my breath when he leaned in with a soft laugh. Try pushing the release tab instead of forcing it, he said. I did, and the cartridge clicked free. You're officially better than IT, I told him. Occupational hazard, he said, fixing small emergencies while waiting for big ones. We started talking during volunteer breaks, about nothing important at first. Bad cafeteria coffee, the songs Dad used to hum that Ethan still remembered. One afternoon he said, Your father used to tell us stories about you. How you built furniture from scrap wood when you were 12, how you refused to sell the first piece because it wasn't perfect. Hearing that nearly broke me, but in a good way. No one else had those fragments. Over the next few weeks, I noticed the difference between Ethan and the people who said they cared out of obligation. He never told me to move on. He asked if I'd eaten. He remembered the anniversary of Dad's passing without making it a spectacle, and he never once asked about the inheritance. Meanwhile, Jack had turned my absence into narrative. Friends messaged cautiously. He says you overreacted. He says you're shutting him out. I didn't defend myself. The truth doesn't need an audience, just time. One night, Tasha invited me out. I almost said no, then decided saying yes was part of healing. The bar was loud, neon lit, and smelled like old whiskey and new perfume. Halfway through my second ginger ale, Tasha leaned close. He's here, she whispered. Jack stood across the room, charming a circle of mutual friends, retelling our history in the flattering light of selective memory. When his eyes found mine, he smiled like we were strangers who once knew a secret. I lifted my glass slightly, a quiet toast to endings, and turned back to Tasha. Later, as I walked to my car, Ethan texted, Coffee after your shift tomorrow? I typed, yes. That one word felt like the first unborrowed decision I'd made in months. Coffee became walks, then dinners. Ethan listened without trying to fix, laughed without competing, and showed up without announcement. One evening, after a volunteer memorial, he found me sitting alone on the hospital steps. Hard night? He asked. Just heavy, I said. Everyone's moving forward. I still feel stuck. He sat beside me. Moving forward isn't the same as leaving behind. You can carry what matters. We talked until the janitor turned off the courtyard lights. Weeks folded into each other. I cooked again. I opened curtains instead of closing them. When I laughed at something silly Ethan said, it startled me so much I almost cried. That's how you know healing's real. It sneaks in disguised as small joy. Then, one Sunday morning, while I was sorting mail, an envelope slid out from the pile. No return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. Jack's. Inside was a short note and a folded newspaper clipping. Heard you're volunteering at the hospice. Guess guilt pays minimum wage. I hope the money's worth it. Jay. The clipping was about real estate trends in Dad's neighborhood, property values soaring again. I stared at it for a long time, then tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. That night, I told Ethan the story from start to finish. Not the short version people get when they ask casually, but everything. The ultimatum, the silence, the funeral, the will. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he just said, I'm sorry he made love feel like a transaction. Something inside me unclenched. 2 months later, the hospice hosted a donor dinner. Buchanan came. He'd helped finalize the estate paperwork for Dad's charitable trust. When he saw me with Ethan, he smiled in a way that looked like relief. Good to see you living, Ms. Whitman. I am, I said, and I meant it. That same week, Jack resurfaced again, but this time not in person. His name popped up in my email inbox. Subject, important. I almost deleted it unread, but curiosity can masquerade as closure. I opened it. Maria, I need to see you. It's serious. Please don't ignore me. Jack. I forwarded it to myself for record keeping, then ignored it anyway. 3 days later, he called from an unknown number. I let it ring, then silenced it. 5 minutes later, another message arrived. I'm not lying this time. You need to know. I'm going to be a father. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. With who? I typed back before I could stop myself. The reply came instantly. With you. My pulse stuttered. It wasn't possible. Almost. We'd been together exactly once during those final chaotic weeks before Dad's diagnosis, a mechanical attempt to patch a sinking boat. Still, the timing could match. Barely. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, every version of the future fracturing at once. Ethan's name flashed on my screen. He'd called to confirm dinner. I answered, voice thinner than usual. Can we talk later? Of course, he said immediately. You okay? I don't know, I whispered. After I hung up, I opened the old folder with Dad's will. His words stared back at me. Choose wisely. The world tilted again. The next morning, I drove to the clinic before sunrise. The parking lot lights still hummed, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and panic. I didn't make an appointment under my name. I told the nurse I needed a consultation. Privacy preferred. She nodded, used the calm tone they probably practiced for women who looked like me, sleepless, uncertain, trying to hold dignity in shaking hands. They drew blood. They ran the test. They said the results would take a few days. 3 days later, Jack texted again. We need to talk about the baby. I hadn't confirmed anything yet, but he sounded sure. I agreed to meet him at a diner near the highway, the kind of place that smells like old coffee and fried promises. He was already there when I arrived, tapping his fingers against a mug. You came, he said, like I'd done him a favor. I'm here to listen, I said. He slid an ultrasound photo across the table. 12 weeks, he said. It's real. I studied the image, gray static, the faint outline of something forming. My stomach tightened. You're saying it's mine? Who else? His voice softened, practiced empathy slipping back into place. I know things ended badly, but maybe this is the universe giving us another chance. I almost laughed. The universe doesn't fix mistakes by repeating them. He leaned forward. I'm not asking for money, Maria. I'm asking for family. I thought about my father's note, the clause in his will, the warning carved into love. If this child is mine, I'll support them, but I won't support lies. He frowned. You think I'd lie about something like this? I think you'd lie about anything that gives you leverage. The waitress came, poured refills, left without speaking. We sat in silence until I said, I want a paternity test. Jack flinched. You don't believe me. I don't trust you, I said. That's not the same thing. He pushed his chair back, angry now. Fine, take your test. But when it proves I'm telling the truth, we're doing this together. No, I said quietly. We're never doing us again. We're just figuring out what's best for the child. He smirked. You think your father's little claws can stop this? What if we raise the baby together? Cohabitate for their sake? What would the will say about that? I stood up, heart pounding. It would say I broke the one promise that saved me. When I left the diner, the morning sun felt too bright, like it was trying to expose everything I'd buried. 2 weeks later, the clinic called. The results were clear. I was pregnant. Shock, then denial, then the strange calm that comes when fate leaves no room for debate. I booked another appointment to discuss options, then sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel until dusk. I told no one for 3 days. Then, finally, I called Uncle Raymond, my father's brother, the only relative I still spoke to. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sighed. Your dad worried this might happen, he said. I blinked. He what? He called me the week before he passed. Said he'd seen enough to know Jack might try to use guilt or desperation to pull you back in. He asked me to remind you of something, if it ever came to that. My throat tightened. What? That being a good mother doesn't mean staying tied to a bad man. The words hit like scripture. I pressed my palm against my stomach and whispered, he knew. Over the next month, I met with a lawyer Buchanan recommended. Family law, this time. We drafted clear agreements. Joint custody, formal child support, every expense documented through court. I would raise the baby independently, with shared rights but separate lives. When I told Jack, he laughed bitterly. You're turning parenthood into paperwork. I'm turning manipulation into structure, I said. He slammed his hand on the table. You're shutting me out of everything. I'm keeping you exactly where you put yourself, I replied. When the baby was born, a daughter I named Sophia, I was there, steady and terrified, but whole. Jack arrived 2 hours later with flowers he probably thought would erase the past. She's perfect, he whispered. She is, I said. That's why I won't let her grow up watching love as control. He tried to touch my shoulder. I moved away. We'll co-parent, Jack, I said softly. That's the end of the story. He stared down at Sophia, then at me. You really hate me that much? I shook my head. I don't hate you. I just finally love myself more than your chaos. The nurse walked in, cheerful and unaware. Family photo? She asked. I smiled at my daughter. Just the two of us, please. The first 6 months of Sophia's life were a blur of diapers, late-night feedings, and small victories that didn't need witnesses. I learned that exhaustion can coexist with peace, that silence can feel full when it's filled with breathing that isn't your own. Jack visited at first, brief, careful meetings supervised by a lawyer's schedule. He brought toys too old for a newborn and smiles that never reached his eyes. He asked questions that circled back to money. Are you doing okay financially? Yes. You sure you don't need help with expenses? I have it covered. Every offer was a test. Every answer was a boundary. Eventually, he stopped asking. When Sophia turned 1, I moved closer to my volunteer work at the hospice. The new apartment was small, bright, and affordable. I set up a nursery with secondhand furniture and a mural of clouds I painted myself. I wanted her to dream in color, not caution. Ethan was there through it all. He never rushed me, never blurred lines, just showed up with groceries or quiet company when the world felt heavy. The first time he held Sophia, she fell asleep instantly. She trusts you, I said. He smiled. Babies can tell who means well. It took another year before I let myself love him. Real love, the kind that doesn't perform miracles or demand loyalty as proof. The kind that shows up in small things, washing bottles, taking late-night shifts, leaving notes in lunch bags that said, you're doing better than you think. By the time Sophia was 2, Ethan and I were officially together. He'd met my uncle, my friends, and even Buchanan, who'd become more like family than counsel. Your father would be proud, Buchanan told me once. Not just because you followed his will, but because you built your own. 2 years later, Ethan and I had a son, David. Watching him come into the world was different this time. Less fear, more faith. When Sophia met her baby brother, she climbed onto the hospital bed, touched his tiny hand, and said, Hi, I'm your big sister. I cried harder than I had in years. Jack still had visitation rights, but distance had become its own filter. He moved out of state for work, and most of our communication went through a shared parenting app. He never stopped trying to test boundaries, just learned new ways to hide the intention. When Sophia turned 3, he sent a text that said, Maybe we could try again, for her sake. I didn't respond. Some ghosts only stay gone if you stop giving them echoes. Ethan never asked me to erase the past. He just built a present so steady the past lost its pull. He loved Sophia like she was his own and treated David like a gift he never deserved but cherished anyway. One evening, while tucking Sophia into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy live with us?" I froze for a second. I'd practiced answers, none of them simple enough for a 4-year-old. "Well, sweetheart," I said finally, brushing her hair back, "sometimes grown-ups love their children more easily than they love each other, and that's okay. It just means you have more people who love you, in different houses." She frowned. "Do you love Daddy?" The question hung between us. I thought of my father's letter, of the funeral, of every quiet night since. "I love that he gave me you," I said softly. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." She smiled, satisfied, and drifted off. When I walked back to the living room, Ethan was there, rocking David. "You handled that beautifully," he said. "I wasn't sure I would," I admitted. "You did," he said, "because you told the truth." Years passed gently. Sophia started school. David learned to walk. I went back to full-time work, running a small community outreach program for families dealing with terminal illness. It felt right, like honoring my father's legacy without living in his shadow. On the 5th anniversary of Dad's death, I took both kids to visit his grave. Sophia carried flowers she picked herself, yellow daisies tied with a pink ribbon. "Grandpa never met me," she said as we knelt. "No," I said, smiling through tears. "But he loved you before he even knew you." She placed the flowers down carefully. "Was he nice?" "The nicest," I said, "and the bravest." She thought for a second. "Did he love money?" That made me laugh. He loved what money could build, safety, choices, freedom, but he loved people more, always. On the drive home, Sophia fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against David's car seat. The sunlight hit their faces just right, gold and quiet. That night, after putting them to bed, I opened Dad's old letter again. The paper was yellowed, the ink slightly faded, but the words still carried the same weight. "You deserve someone who stands by you during the hardest moments, not someone who runs when life gets difficult." I folded it gently, slid it back into its envelope, and whispered, "I chose wisely, Dad. Thank you." Outside, the night was calm. Ethan sat on the porch waiting, 2 mugs of tea beside him. When I joined him, he handed me one and said, "To clarity." I smiled. "To inheritance, the kind that lasts." We clinked mugs, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by what I'd lost. I felt blessed by what I'd learned. Because love that endures doesn't arrive with grand gestures or promises carved in stone. It arrives quietly, like morning light after a long storm, and stays.